This is from the website thewaythetruthandthelife.net. This is April 30th, 2014. The purpose of this video is a report on the thousands of jihadists from America, Canada, and Europe going to fight in jihad through Turkey. In Europe, the beheading on the street in London and the terror on the streets and the difficulty in schools and the harassment is causing some alarm. The visit of the German president to Turkey is what set off the reaction to deceive what is going on and who's at fault, because Turkey supports the jihad. The driving force behind this is Erdogan and his AKP party. They have used Islam and the Koran to radicalize a majority. And like the retired Turkish general said, we don't need to take Europe by jihad. We're going to ride the democratic bus. They have a birthing policy. Here in Russia, throughout Europe, in America, just check it out. They're going to end up dominating by democracy.
The Quran also instructs its followers to lie, that's known as Taqiyya, or to lie by omission, known as Kitman, in order to spread Islam. But one of the biggest lies is that Islam is a religion of peace. Instead, Islam is a religion of war, violence, and vengeance to be spread by the sword. The goal of Islam is that Allah's word and religion reign supreme. According to the Quran, the holy book of Muslims and Islam, Muslims are to pretend to be friendly to unbelievers until strong enough to overcome them. Then, Muslims are to make war against unbelievers, that's non-Muslims, converting them by the sword. Also, according to the Quran, any people conquered by the sword must then convert to Islam, or submit to virtual slavery, or be killed. Some list of choices, huh? Make no mistake about it. The goal of Islam is Islamic world domination, and that's as instructed by their holy book, the Quran. Allah will only be satisfied when the entire world is Muslim.
And a report on Euronews this morning by Turkish minister that it is not Turkey that's the problem, but that the other countries where the jihadists come from, that's their business to take care of. In fact, parents that come to Turkey to look for their sons are not permitted entry to Turkey. That is an Erdogan policy. And to show this and to show the background of deception that is part of the Quran is the purpose of this video. I will show the clip of the minister speaking on the Euronews, and I will show an earlier clip in February of Erdogan's policies and the testimony of a parent that was not allowed to go and find her two sons that had just left and come to Turkey to go for jihad.
A Turkish government minister has called on Europe to do more to stop radicals travelling through his country to join the jihad in Syria. He wants to prevent young Muslims crossing the border to fight against Syrian government forces. Syria has become a magnet for extremists taking part in jihad or holy war. The Europeans let them travel from their countries to Turkey, he said. Then they asked Turkey to prevent them going to Syria. If you know they're going to Syria, then you should prevent them from traveling. The minister told Euronews he'd like to see European countries sharing information about the movements and activities of young radicals. Thousands of young men have left Europe to join Islamist rebels fighting in Syria. As the conflict drags on, the numbers are growing, with some recruits as young as 15 or 16.
Don't be deceived. Erdogan's Turkish policy is to support the jihadists. Here's a clip of a mother that went to try and get her 2 sons from Turkey, and she was barred. It was a distraught mother who chose to remain anonymous. Yesterday morning she flew to Turkey with the goal of going to the south of the country at the Syrian border. She hopes to go find her 2 sons who went to fight alongside the rebels several months ago. But upon her arrival to Istanbul, she was arrested. They asked me for my passport. Then, suddenly, they printed a piece of paper and told me, "No, come with us, forbidden in Turkey." This was done without any explanation. It is absolutely sad, pathetic, and unspeakable. A totally arbitrary arrest, according to her lawyer, who even evokes the hypothesis of the complicity of the Belgian state. We thought that it was the Belgian authorities who asked the Turkish authorities to arrest her. However, clearly this is not the case. But what interest do the Turkish authorities have in arresting a mother who came to search for her son in Turkey at the Syrian border, when they have allowed hundreds of young people, including minors, without preventing them from going through their territory, as the majority of Belgian minors have transited through Turkey? The Belgian Foreign Ministry stated that this came from an autonomous decision by Turkish authorities. She was expelled. I learned this yesterday when she was about to take a plane to return to Belgium. But this was done, I heard, while being accompanied by a TV crew, which is supported by an opposition political party, and this is not the first time. Then I would like that we get told beforehand about these types of approaches, and we don't go like that in an adventure. This mother says she wanted to bring her sons back to Belgium. She sometimes is able to have phone contact with them. I receive news, like the majority of parents, when there is available signal. It is very sporadic and weak in most cases. It is estimated that more than 200 young Belgians have joined the Syrian rebels with the aim of toppling President Bashar al-Assad. The idea of the birthing policy in Islam is real. The Gaza Strip has increased its population 15 times since 1948. The average age is something like 13. And they're being supported by the United Nations, which gets its money from America, Canada, and Europe mainly. But that is just part of the reality. Democracy in America was a representative democracy where you voted for someone who was supposed to have wisdom and insight, and they chose the president from the Electoral College. Basically, it goes along the lines of how people have voted. There's efforts to get that changed. The reality is democracy in America gives the people on public assistance, women's liberation, and gay and lesbian. It's a coalition. They will win most elections, and as daycare goes on and children are less able to grow to higher levels of caring, they're involved in narcissism, and homosexuality is just normal. That boys like boys at an early age and girls like girls is just normal. That with a good foundation they grow to be able to care about the opposite sex and care enough that the product of the union is something that is highly valued, not aborted. But that aside, so democracy is used by gay, lesbian, homosexuals, and people looking for public assistance. They form a coalition. Islamists have control of the family and control of the political process. Muslims submit to the dogma that comes from the Koran. Now there's a number of different factions, like the Persian Muslims and the Arab Muslims and the Turkish Muslims, and even though they all use the Quran, they have a great deal of conflict with each other and even declaring one another heretics and murdering. But the point that I want to get to here is that democracy has a serious problem. And there's some insight into the background of this. One of the big insights came from Steven Pinker in his TED lecture on the hunter-gatherers. They emerged out of the forest jungle about 10 million years ago to learning to walk and run and chase game on the savanna, that is the grassland. There had been a major change in Central Africa, creating grasslands and then grazing herds. So that brought Adam and Eve out of the jungle, out of the Garden of Eden, walking and talking. Before that, there was lack of logical speech. Before that, the great apes, and still the great apes without their logical speech, the females breastfeed their young, often to the second molars. They breastfeed from anywhere from equivalent to 2 to 6 years old in human terms, and they don't kill. The female mothers don't get involved in infanticide. That's a human trait, and it has to do with understanding the development of the human race and how the genetics, it's the same going all the way back to the reptiles. It's the strong male that gets to make the next generation. And it's the female that goes along or is attracted that gets to make the next generation. So that has a genetic component that's single cell life started, made. Let me go back to say, to me, the universe, to me, matter is not created or destroyed. Space is not created or destroyed. Energy is not created or destroyed. It is eternal. And that physical reality I call God. And in Him we live and move and have our being. So, but the creation is forming something out of the dirt. And the creation of life happened in the order of 4 billion years ago. It was single cell life. This is the atom of existence. And Adam didn't have a wife. Adam procreated by dividing, making 2 atoms out of 1 atom, and going on like that with cell division. The story of Eve being created out of Adam's rib, that amounts to the what happened about 1 billion years ago. The sexual reproduction, part of a cell joined with another part of a cell and created life. It's out of Adam's rib. The allegory could be interpreted. But here we have this non-logical life evolving for billions of years, for 1 billion years. And up until about 10 million years ago, there was none of this life had logical speech. That was the product of humans as they emerged from the great apes out of the jungle and had to plan the fight and the logic. The male brain and the female brain are different because the female took care of the children, the business of the day. The males had to plan the fight and plan the defense. As Steven Pinker showed, amongst the hunter and gatherer tribes, up to 60% of the men died by violence. And the reason for the violence, aside from hunting, was attacking another tribe to kill the men and take the women. And that was the stronger tribe, because inbreeding destroys the genetic health of a tribe. Just like with some Eskimos, if a man was coming through where there were Eskimos living, he would be invited to sleep with the wife or daughter, having nothing to do with lust, having to do with the need for new genetics, because they degenerated. Just like there's villages in the Alps that they have a severe problem with genetic inbreeding, and the queen has a couple cousins that are disabled. There was enough inbreeding among the European royalty that it's a problem there. But so it's what has the strength in getting the strange women was a strength giver, new genetics. And this process led to 3 basic types of genetic human nature that are important to understand what's going on and why democracy as such will destroy itself. And there's different ways it'll do it. That's why I'm going through this background with you. But to go back and look at the great apes don't perform infanticide. They care for their babies. And it's a simple reason to understand. There's 2 parts to it. The first part is going all the way back to early animals. The male domination and essentially rape is whether it's dogs or cats or whatever, the male dominating the female. And there is a genetic resentment of this raping. And great apes and earlier animals, the female doesn't associate the offspring with the rape. So they don't resent the infants. Now, there's a caring part of humans that's genetic, because the infants that were cared for were the ones that tended to thrive and survive. So that, but you got to remember too that brain surgeon in Canada who left the implanted electrodes and showed that our earlier life stages are still in our brain. We have different life stages that have been circumvented as we grow through different life stages. The toddler is still there. The fetal child is still there. And but that's another thing. We got life stage, but also we have different components besides life stages. The right and left hemisphere for men function different. For women, they tend to be duplication. So she can have a stroke on one side, and she has speech in both hemispheres and the ability to use logic and walk and so forth. She is less disabled with a stroke than a man. That's just reality. And a man has something like 4 billion more brain cells, because the logic that men needed to use to work together and plan the defense or plan the aggression is different than what females needed to survive. They needed to take care of the business, to take care of the baby, and it was the male job to go out and get new females or defend against those that were attacking. Now, also along this line is the women that went along with the invader were the ones who had babies. And that's why the white girls are attracted to the black boys when they come out of town. And you take white boys into a black community, the black girls are attracted to the white boys. It's the same everywhere. It has nothing to do with race. Ask any invading soldier and he'll tell you the teenage women, whether it's Japanese in China, Russians in Afghanistan, wherever. It's a genetic thing. The females that were attracted to the invader were the ones that tended to survive and propagate. These things are maybe a distraction. What survived had to do with the alpha males and the behavior of the females that they were attracted to. But it left 3 different kinds of behavior, because there's not just the female resentment of the male domination, there's male resentment of the male domination. The alpha male would beat up the other males also. So you find that one side you have socialism, and Christianity was co-opted by the worldly church and the priest. There was a women's support system that she could join the church and have support and against her fear of her husband. And that's breaking down now because of civil law in America and Europe. She doesn't need the church, so they don't bother with it anymore. It wasn't the religious foundation of caring that the farm families had that still goes on with the Amish. That's a whole other thing. That's what Jesus the Christ was talking about, the love of a family that where you're gathered in my name, which is love. I am with that. It isn't a ritual thing. It has to do with a caring that develops amongst a healthy family that works together, farm families, just like Buddhism flourished in the farm families in China. But to get back, the middle group of men are anarchists, and anarchists are against male domination. So they have to end up, anarchy doesn't work, they end up socialist, communist, and they work together against fascism. But part of our genetic nature is when we're threatened, we want a good leader, an alpha male that we can follow and have confidence in. So Islamofascism tends to thrive in times of trouble. People are attracted, want a strong leader. That we're seeing these things come, and I'm not going to have opportunity in this to completely explore how we might help that in this dichotomy between the male domination and the female manipulation of socialism, destroying, and the female resentment of caring for the children. Autism has gone from 1 in 1,700 when I was born For boys, it was, I think, 145 last year. And it's real. It's the lack of a maternal nursing bond, and there's evidence that even the chemistry of a female who was raised in daycare is degraded to the point that it degrades the fetus while it's still inside her in terms of stages of development. These things, the brain developing, has to do with nerve growth factor, which is only present at certain stages of development, and the care needs to be there or it's not reinforced, and there's autistic development. But those things are real. The answers have to do with learning how to work together. There was a culture. It died with the death of Gustavus Adolphus in the 30 Years' War. But the Northern Europeans, Scandinavians, who come from a legacy of mammoth hunters. And the mammoth hunters, you're talking about tons of meat. They learned to make boats and sail long distances and carry the meat down the river and then sail out there. You can find the megaliths they left on the shores all along Africa and Asia. They had a wonderful culture that thrived for in the order of 1 million years through men working together to hunt. And they built, you can see in Ukraine and Russia, around the Black Sea, the villages made out of mammoth bones. It isn't that the mammoths lived there. They sailed on the rivers. And it was a culture of working together, and men working together. And it left its marks for a long time. The Vikings, and before that, the Goths were the same origin. Before that, what they called the Vikings, the Goths were able to come down, even though they converted to home Christianity. Before, they were corrupted with a written text and so forth. They'd learned from the original gospel spread around the Black Sea, the farm family culture there. But the Goths were a tremendously powerful group because of this background, genetic and cultural. You're talking in the order of 100,000 years of this hunting woolly mammoths. At any rate, they were so honorable that the czars, before the czars, they'd come down and dominated the Rus, and then went back. And the Rus lords, early Russian lords, had so much infighting, they actually invited them back, and the czars had this Viking background to them. They called them a different name. But by the same extent, these invaders, Norse invaders, come down and were so honorable and such good warriors that the Byzantine Empire hired these. They weren't Christian, but they were hired by the Byzantine Empire to help deal with the Islamic invasions. And there were settlements that the Muslims couldn't destroy in Spain and Portugal. This had to do with a culture of men working together, and it's died out with 30 Years' War devastated Sweden the same way that the war in Afghanistan devastated Russia. They lost so many of their young men. The women lost their heart for war, and basically had a lot of control anyway. That was part of the communist revolution. Abortion and divorce were liberally given under communism. But what happened in Scandinavia in the 30 Years' War, Gustavus Adolphus was killed in battle, and they had lost 2 generations of young men in the war. And Christine became queen, and she was apparently homosexual, and she just tore down the extension of, there was New Sweden, the first civil marriage in the United States. What's now the United States was a Swedish civil ceremony. Tinkham, Pennsylvania was New Sweden, but she withdrew all claims to territory and everything. And then, so that she could pursue her apparent homosexual lusts, after her father was killed as a Lutheran fighting Catholicism, she converted to Catholicism so she could go down on the Mediterranean someplace and live with a bunch of girls for the rest of her life in a convent. But at any rate, the problems we have are real, and the conclusion that I've come to is that what Jesus said had a lot of wisdom. Two things. He said, it's better I go away, I'll send you the Spirit of truth. Spirit of truth is learning from the world we live in, learning true science, not the gobbledygook and psychobabble taught in psychology and sociology in universities. The days of the probability, poof, magic creation, the Big Bang Theory, and so much nonsense at the university. That's not true science. But at any rate, you gotta have a PhD in mathematics to argue with these people today. But where are we going here? Before we get on with that, I want to insert here about the gobbledygook of history too. It's like Steven Pinker exploding the myth of the noble savage. I'd just like to share with you, I grew up next to the Tuscarora Indian Reservation. We moved out there when I was about 4. We used to go out there to get our water. We didn't have a well, and there was a spring in the Tuscarora Indian Reservation. We'd get our drinking water out there. But I was brought up with this myth of the noble savage and the evil white man, and I just didn't make sense to me, but that's what they were teaching, and how bad the Europeans were and everything. And then I learned that the reservation was originally, that area was originally the neuter tribe. And with the French explorers, some priests came, and the neuter tribe had converted largely to Christianity. And the Iroquois were a very aggressive tribe. They had been slaves and freed themselves from another tribe up in Canada in their background, but they enjoyed torturing people, and they involved themselves in what do you call that, eating other people, cannibalism. And they were so enraged about the neuter tribe. The neuter tribe, that word comes because they were around Niagara Falls in that area, and they were between the Hurons and the Iroquois, and that was a neutral area. But with this conversion to Christianity, the Iroquois started attacking, and they got these 2 priests, tied them to posts, and started fires under them. And the one priest was preaching Jesus. They cut out his tongue and cut off his lips, and then they cut the meat off their legs and ate it. They killed those 2 priests, and then they went to exterminate the neuter tribe. The Indians on the reservation aren't the original neuters. They're the offsprings from the cannibals that exterminated the whole tribe, the whole neuter tribe. They're from the Iroquois. But so much for what they teach at the university for history or whatever. That not that there isn't truth there, but now the insights about this, these French priests who went with nothing and just preached the love of Christ, they kept written communication, and those communication, I found a book written by a priest in the 1800s that used all these letters to write the history. And I put that on my website and had it verbalized, and if you would be interested in having it ready, you could have that done there too. I'll give a footnote for that. But at any rate, the myth of the noble savage. And the truth of it is, aristocracy degenerates as soon as women get money. If they don't abort their babies or do infanticide, if they're affluent, they hire somebody, wet nurses and babysitters, and their children don't develop to the higher levels of caring. They're selfish. And that's what culture is. Narcissism, look at me, look at my art, look at my fancy dress, look at this, look at my makeup. And it's just narcissism because they didn't develop any higher to care about other people and care about what's going on in the world the way that you would find with more often in farm families like Buddhist and Christian farms. The Roma, which escaped a thousand, well, actually now more than 1,000 years ago, from India with the Islamic invasions, they found it safe around the Christian farm areas around the Black Sea and then the Byzantine Empire. And not to put Rome down before it became corrupted by affluence, it was safe in Jesus' time to walk around. Affluence destroys society after society because the wealthy get money and the women don't want that resentment of the male. They don't want to care for the baby. So they hire somebody to do it, and the child isn't cared for properly, and you end up with a bunch of children that are autistic or whatever. Look at what happened to Ceausescu's children raised in an orphanage. That's another story. But, these things are real, and the real truth is there if you know what to look for. But you have to. The books are a description of it, and you have to have the common sense to know the truth. All right, we'll get on with it now. Again, look at the other side. How in times of stress, there's a gravitation to the alpha male, like in Nazi Germany, and the alignment with Islam. And that's a little bit different because Islam is a indoctrinating theocratic with the book that says to cut off the heads of the ones you conquer that don't submit to Islam. Look what happened in Kosovo. First of all, there was the Islamo-fascists. The largest Waffen-SS group was Muslim, and in that area, and they killed the Jews and the Roma that wouldn't convert to Islam. And they allowed illegal Muslims to come in from Albania. And then communism took over, and they allowed illegal aliens. Kosovo was the heartland of Serbia with all kinds of churches and everything. And Hillary Clinton had to declare where the Clintons got their money from when she ran for president, and ended up they had a lot of money for their Clinton Library and so forth. They got millions of dollars from Saudi Arabia in order to betray the Serbs in Kosovo. Did the Serbs attack Muslims? Yes. How do you destroy a destroyer? Here's the result of the illegal Muslim integration into Kosovo. The Kosovo Liberation Army, these illegal Muslim immigrants are the sons or grandsons of them. Look what they're doing to the Serbs as they take over and not ethnically cleanse, they destroy kill the non-Muslims. Now I just go to look after Clinton received all the millions of dollars from the Saudis. You can find that from Hillary's filings for running for president, where they got money for the Clinton library, and some of the money shows up. But he was paid to get NATO to bomb the Serbian army and take the homeland of the Serbs, which had already been invaded by illegal immigration. And look what you have after that. Well, the evil that had been going on with the murder, the church burnings, the beheadings, and the Serbs tried to push the illegal aliens back into Albania, and the Muslims got Clinton to get the NATO to bomb and destroy the Serbian army and give Kosovo away, violating international law. It doesn't make any difference. And now they're training jihadists there. And look at this clip of what they did to hundreds of churches. Here's just one example. A whole community, this is today, in your day, turning out to enjoy the destruction of a Christian church, because they've either killed or forced all the natives, Serbians, out of their home. This is not history. This is what's going on today all over the world, where Islam is taking over, whether it's Nigeria or Myanmar or the Philippines or Thailand, Malaysia, wherever.
Mira Llapian kanë ardhur këtu te Kisha Ortodokse në Besjan për të shprehur revoltën e tyre ndaj ngjarjeve që kanë ndodhur në Kosovë. Mira Llapian kanë ardhur këtu te Kisha Ortodokse në Besjan për të shprehur revoltën e tyre ndaj ngjarjeve tragjike që kanë ndodhur në Kosovë. Mira protestues Llapian kanë dalur këtu te Kisha Ortodokse në Besjan dhe e dogjën atë për të shprehur revoltën e tyre ndaj ngjarjeve tragjike që kanë ndodhur ditë më parë në Kosovë. Testuesit ose diçka tjetër?
Gjithçka kena mujt, i kena marrë, mos atë sigurisht për rrugë, e kena siguruar rrugën pa tash.
Tamam, pej drejtën profilit që shkon tash u mosha, protestën se kemi këtu drejt sigurisht. Bashkëpunim me ta organizatorët, po tash në këtë
how to move forward with a healthy foundation for governance. Those who raise healthy children, that care about their children, with a mother that is willing to breastfeed and stay with her children until they're of age like 12 or so. But how do you choose the people who govern? A man and a woman, to qualify to run for office, a man and a woman who have shown by their fruits you shall know them. That's something Jesus said. By their fruits you shall know them. We don't have the sophisticated wisdom to know all the laws of behavior to be able to predict these things, but a man and a woman must first of all be able to have and raise a healthy family, to be an administrator, a judge, or a representative. It's that simple. And build the community leaders are eligible for the next level, and have levels of government that you have to have served on all the levels and compete with others, like 10 communities competing, the leaders, man and wife from each of the 10 communities, competing for that level of government and that higher level of government after they've served and shown they have competence that they can compete with 10 of those higher level and on up. It doesn't take that long to get to large numbers, powers of 10. So that's my thoughts on this. But Islam is coming, just like in Gaza, and they're living off from the United Nations. And they're just like in Myanmar, the Buddhists are fighting back now. They took and one monk and cut off his testicles, killed him, and burned him in a mosque. And that there's been this wherever Islam is. Look at how many were murdered in Pakistan, India, going back. That's where the Roma came from 1,000 years ago. The Roma escaped Muslim invasions where they were exterminating the Hindus. And it's going on in the Philippines. It's going on. The estimates for this year now in Nigeria that there's been 2,400 Christians killed already. And just last week they took a bunch of girls and they've been sold to other Muslims in other countries. That slavery is still real in Islam. It's condoned by the Koran, just like beheading. Another thing, well, and just to end this, the word slave comes from Slav. The German lords took Slavs as their slaves. And just like the Crimeans took hundreds of thousands of Russians and sold them into slavery, the Muslim Tartars. And they're working together with the support of Turkey today. And they are working together with the Islamo-fascists that were go back with their heritage to the Hitler. And you might know that the largest Waffen-SS group was Muslim. And the reason that Stalin moved the Muslims over to Kazakhstan or whatever out of the way of the Nazi army is that they were joining the Nazi army. They wanted to kill Jews and kill Roma. And so look into some of these things and don't listen to all the nonsense that Look at Obama's and his representatives. None of them know what they're talking about. They're all looking at the script of what they're reading. And you got his over the ambassadors in Europe and Asia, and she's telling them F European Union, as they didn't want to get on board with the coup that Obama pulled in Ukraine. And look at what Clinton did in Kosovo, and now they're training jihadists there and burning churches, and they've ethnically cleansed so much, and that the Serbs were trying to take back their homeland from an Islamic invasion, and Clinton rescued them. And just look at Hillary had to declare where she got the money, where the Clintons got the money from that they've been spreading around for their library and all that. They got millions from the Muslims for their going into Kosovo. Look at this. It's a tragedy, and nobody seems to care because they're not raised with care. And it's getting worse every generation. So let's try to get ready for things to break down, what we're going to do to put something reasonable together. And it's not going to be democracy. On one side, you'll either have the socialist women's liberation, homosexual rights for abortion and all that, and that society, as it says in the Bible, the sins of the fathers are visited on the children of the third and fourth generation. What that means is if the men don't take care to manage their society within 3 generations, it goes to hell. And that's the truth. Look at the autism rate. Look at the crime rate. On the other side, you've got the Islamo-fascists, and that is the times of stress looking for an alpha male. And remember, there's a lack of unity. The alpha males fight against one another. Okay, I'll end it here. Thank you for your attention.